is traveling with them. As you all know, Maine is an early caucus state, and all eyes are going to be upon Maine very shortly, the first week of February. Since 1997, Ron Paul has served the U.S. House of Representatives in Washington from Texas, a district south and southwest of Houston that includes Galveston. One of his driving campaign issues is the failure of the U.S. dollar to hold its value and how that affects our home ownership, our bank accounts, and our debt. He serves on the House Committee on Financial Services and is chairman of the Financial Services Subcommittee on Domestic Monetary Policy and Technology. He's an advocate of sound money, backed by gold. And that is the standard upon which this country was founded. His other resounding campaign issue is spending our tax money on compelling matters at home, not on prolonged wars abroad. He serves on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, well qualified on this issue. A native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Paul is a graduate of Gettysburg College and Duke University School of Medicine, where he earned his medical degree. He served as a medical officer in the United States Air Force from 1963 until 1968. He worked as an obstetrician gynecologist during the 60s and the 70s, delivering more than 4,000 babies. Then he decided to run for public office in 1976. He is an author as well. He's written several books. And in 2009, he initiated the Campaign for Liberty. And his ideas has been expressed in these earlier books and numerous published articles. In 1982, he wrote The Case for Gold. In 2008, he wrote Pillars of Prosperity. In 2007, A Foreign Policy of Freedom, Peace, Commerce, and Honest Friendship. In 2009, he wrote End the Fed. And then last year, he published The Liberty Defined, 50 Essential Issues That Affect Our Freedom. The Pauls have several children. They've been married many years. They have children and grandson. And their son, Rand Paul, was elected in 2010 to the United States Senate. He represents the Senate in the state of Kentucky. And this is the first father and son team to ever serve concurrently in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. Ron Paul has been characterized as the godfather of the Tea Party movement. He speaks with energy in the national presidential debates as one of the 4 Republican contenders still standing from a much larger field. He came in second in the New Hampshire primary in a field of 6. And that was when Newt Gingrich was 4th and Santorum was 5th. Yes, Maine is an early caucus state, and with a focus on early February, we're pleased to host Congressman Paul for some lobster today and to be the site of his Freeport campaign message. After his remarks, we invite you all to come forward and shake his hand and say hello personally. Please welcome presidential candidate and Congressman Dr. Ron Paul.
And Linda, thank you very much for that very nice introduction, and thank you for the emphasis on hard money, sound money. That's very important. But also, I'm very pleased to be here. I understand this is a very important city. Something about freedom being discovered here is still alive and well, the way I understand it. I mean, you're leading the charge on economic growth. I understand there's a business around here. I think it's LL Bean, been around for 100 years. That must mean you treat them pretty well. But it is a real pleasure to be here, and I want to emphasize something that Linda said on the introduction. It is true that this is the first time there was a member in the House and the son was in the Senate. There's been the reverse, where there's been a senator and then a son was in the House of Representatives. But when we were sworn in just about a year ago, it was sort of interesting because of that fact. And I remember being on a TV show, and they were making the point, but they were sort of making fun that I was only in the House and my son was already in the Senate. So the only thing I could come up with is I said, that's pretty important. I said, and I've told him already that if he does a very, very good job in the Senate, someday he might be able to be in the House of Representatives as well. We're very proud of him, and he's doing a great job. But the emphasis on sound money is important because I have talked about that for so many years. As a matter of fact, it was one of the motivating factors for me getting involved in politics back in the 1970s, because it was the breakdown of the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was in 1971, which emphasized the fact that no longer would our dollar be linked to gold. And I believe that to be a significant event. It's turned out to be such. Since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, they have destroyed 98% of the value of the dollar. I would say they have been doing a lousy job, as far as I'm concerned, on protecting the value of our money. But since 1971, an additional 85% of the value of the dollar has been undermined. What does that do? It punishes people. Anybody who wanted to save. So you're back in your 70s, you want to take care of yourself, you put money back in the bank, you want to earn interest, but you can't take care of yourself because they've destroyed the value of the money. If you did it as an individual, it would be called counterfeiting, you'd go to prison. But what do? We totally ignore what the Federal Reserve does, and we give them a pass, and they get to do it in secret. But that is ending. That is what's happening. These last 4 years, we've let the people know in this country what the Federal Reserve is all about and why we demand an audit and eventually removal of the Federal Reserve System. There's quite a few things about the Federal Reserve. First, it's a moral issue. Counterfeiting should be illegal. When the founders insisted that we have a sound currency, the first thing that they did after the Constitution, they wrote the 1792 Coinage Act. And they wanted to protect the value of the currency. So they put in the Coinage Act, anybody that was caught counterfeiting the money would get the death penalty. That's how strongly they felt about this. Boy, that Fed would be in trouble if we ever enforced that law, I'll tell you. But it is a moral issue, it's an economic issue because they won't admit it, but the Federal Reserve is the culprit. They're the ones who cause the business cycle. It's the booms and the busts. If they can create booms, then the bust has to come. They want to take credit for the boom, but then they have always, up until now, have always gotten the credit for getting us out of the bust periods, the recessions. But that isn't the case anymore because they're no longer capable of even reviving the economy by more spending and more printing of press money. So we're up against the wall because we're so deeply in debt. But one of the real reasons why you want a sound monetary system is to restrain the growth of government. If we had a system where we had to pay the bills as we go along, whether it's for the welfare state or for all these wars, that this would all end quickly. I made a proposal once, just to make this point, to get rid of the withholding tax. Besides the withholding tax, not only should the income tax be eliminated, but the withholding tax is one where it tries to hide things, you know, and not make people feel how much they're paying. But if everybody had to send a check in 30 days and we paid all our bills, we couldn't borrow money or print money, believe me, we'd quit supporting the government because we'd be sick and tired of paying it. But by delaying this and the payment for our future date, then they're able to get away with this. But my proposal was, if you didn't have a withholding, people would realize how expensive this would be. So it's an excuse to get around and spend more money and allow the welfare state to grow and also the warfare state to grow until we get, and the bubble gets so big. In the last 40 years, it's been a formation of a huge, huge bubble. And the recessions we've had have just been the attempt of the marketplace to make these corrections, but it's no longer working, and that's why we're in the midst of a financial crisis. It's not in the United States, it's worldwide, and it is the reason why we as a people must look at the monetary issue, look at the role of government. What should the role of government be? Should it be there to run an entitlement system, or should it be there to police the world? I say no, the government should be there to protect our freedoms and nothing else. We have gotten into a real mess, and I think the basic flaw has been the most important flaw to explain why we're here, is our lack of respect and sending too many people to Washington that don't really care, they don't understand what the Constitution says. We should send only people who know what it says and to take their oath of office seriously. There is no authority in the Constitution to print money. Matter of fact, there's a prohibition against printing money. They had experienced runaway inflation with the continental dollar. There was to be no emitting of bills of credit, and only gold and silver could be legal tender. There was no authority for the central bank. So we just ignored it. We didn't change the Constitution. We just ignored it in the monetary issue. But what about the entitlement system? Where do they get this entitlement system out of the Constitution? Besides, this concept of entitlement has totally distorted the understanding about rights. We as individuals get our rights from our Creator or in a natural rate. Our right to our life and our right to our liberty. And therefore, it's not an entitlement. You have a right to your life and your liberty. You ought to have a right to what you earn, and you ought to have a right to keep it, but you don't have an entitlement to somebody else's wealth and for the redistribution. But that system has been around a long time, and politicians have been rewarded for it. We were a super wealthy country, but the wealth is gone. We don't have the productive jobs that we used to have. We've had 30 million new people in this country in the last 10 years, but really no new productive jobs. And this is why we're stagnant, and why we're just only surviving on more borrowed money. That's why the national debt's going up over $1 trillion a year. It's totally unsustainable. But not only does this false illusion about money cause the welfare state to grow, look at what it has done to the foreign policy. You know, I had always dreamed of the day of the collapse of the Soviet system so we could get rid of the Cold War and start saving money and bringing our troops home and putting all that energy into building our middle class once again. But what did we do after the Cold War ended? We went around looking for more monsters to destroy and creating a new Cold War. We're in more countries now than ever. Instead of shrinking this militarism and involvement overseas, we've expanded it. I think it's time, not only because it's the right thing to do, the constitutional thing to do, but because we can't afford it anymore. We need to end these wars and bring all our troops home. We have financed the entitlement system and the wars with an illegal system of money, but if we would just have individuals who believed enough in the Constitution to only go to war the way we have been told that we're supposed to do it. Our founders did not want the king or the executive branch of government to make solitary decisions on when the people have to go to war and sacrifice not only financially but sacrifice so many lives. So if we would have only followed the Constitution and said no wars unless they're declared. If they're declared, you go fight them, win them, and then you come home. But since World War II, we can't even number the wars because they're continuous. We elect different presidents who complain about it and say they're going to do something about it. But forever, no matter what they say, they keep expanding it. Even with this current administration that was supposed to downplay these wars are in more countries than ever. And the next plan is, when are we going into Syria? When are we going into Iran? We can't afford this any longer. We're in debt. We can't pay for it. It doesn't make any sense. And you know what? It tends to make a lot of people unhappy with us and tend to create enemies. It distracts from our national defense. So there's every reason in the world that common sense would say that we should change our ways. Financially, there's no doubt about it. In these past 10 years, the wars overseas has caused our national debt to go up over $4 trillion. And this is all money, as far as I'm concerned, down the drain, because that money came out. And if you look at these funds expanded in the last several decades, what has happened to the middle class? The middle class is shrinking. It's getting smaller. They're getting poorer. They're losing their jobs. They're losing their houses. So a country can eventually self-destruct by spending all this money maintaining an empire. Fortunately, we did not have to fight the Soviets. The Soviets were powerful. They one time had 30,000 nuclear weapons. That was a period of time when I was called up to military duty in the 1960s. But that was taken care of for financial reasons. Eventually, the Soviets couldn't take care of all these bills, and economically they failed. You know, they were so foolish, they went and got bogged down in a war in Afghanistan. Can you imagine such a thing? So it's too bad that we don't learn these lessons of history, and unfortunately these wars will end. We should end them gracefully and deliberately and work through a transition, and we can. It's possible if we would do the right things. But it'll end because we will not be able to afford it. Our system is unsustainable at this rate. We can't live on borrowed money and printed money, and at the same time an undermining of our civil liberties. With a wartime atmosphere, what happens is that people are more willing to give up their rights. And just think how concerned we were, and rightfully so, after 9/11. But that doesn't mean we should have sacrificed and given up on our Fourth Amendment. And I believe that that bill that was passed 2 weeks after 9/11, which was called the Patriot Act, should never have been passed, and we ought to repeal it. When I asked one member of Congress why he was voting for it, and he knew there were some bad things, and he said, how can I go home and tell people I voted against the Patriot Act under these circumstances? He said, that'd be hard to explain. I said, but that's your job. Go home and explain why you're doing it. But I'm also convinced that if the bill would have been called Repeal the Fourth Amendment Act, nobody would have voted for it, but that is essentially what it did. But under these circumstances in the last 10 years, whether it's the wars overseas or even this ill-advised war against drugs, too many people give up too many liberties thinking that they're going to be made safer. But the founders were right, especially Benjamin Franklin said that there's no reason ever to give up your liberties for safety and security. If you do, you will lose both your safety and security. I'm afraid that's what's happening to us now. But the attack on our personal liberties has continued, not only since the Patriot Act, but in more recent years. Right now, just about a year ago, the President has announced to the people, that our people, the United States citizens, that now the policy of the federal government is to be able to assassinate even American citizens without a trial. you know, they've abused some of this over the years, and we've been involved in secret killings, and we know about those kind of things, but this is the first time it's right out on the table and saying this is the policy. We should wake up and say this shouldn't be the policy, and we should remove anybody from office that says this is the policy of the United States government. But to establish this as a principle, it's already been used 3 times. American citizens without trial, without charges, only being suspects, have been killed and assassinated by our government. But it is continuing. Just last month, there was another bill passed in the Senate, passed in the House last summer. And that had to do with the National Defense Authorization Act. Another attack on our civil liberties. In this bill, it is blatantly stating the fact that, yes, any American citizen can be arrested if they're a suspect, even if you're aligned yourself with a controversial internet site, or attended a meeting, or belonged to an organization, or donated money to somebody, you could be a suspect. The government would decide whether you're a suspect or not. But they have now, under the law, and the president has signed into it, that the military can arrest an American citizen, be held indefinitely without a trial, and now that is the law of the land. That should not be the law of the land in America. That's not what America has been based on. You know, there was even one provision in that bill that was so astounding that if an individual had been arrested in a more ordinary fashion and tried in a civilian court and found to be innocent, this bill would have said, even if found to be innocent, the government could make the decision to hold them anyway, indefinitely. But fortunately, there was a senator from Kentucky that had that removed from the bill. You know, the economic crisis comes from too much spending, because I think we lose twice when the government takes the money from you, because you lose when they take the money. But then when they spend the money, we lose also because they're getting more regulations or fighting wars that we shouldn't be involved in. So spending is the big problem. And we're running a deficit each year well over $1 trillion. Our national debt is $16 trillion. We owe foreigners now $3 trillion, and it's just a steady increase. So my suggestion in the first year of a new administration that we hope to be leading, we would want to cut a budget deficit. We want to cut the budget by $1 trillion in the first year. That, of course, would mean that the American people would have to accept the rationale that the role of government would be different. It's not to run an entitlement system, a welfare system, a transfer of wealth system, nor to be the policeman of the world. We would have to accept the more traditional role, what the Constitution said. The purpose of the federal government is to provide for a strong national defense, give us a strong dollar and an honest dollar, but also the real purpose of the federal government is to bring us together and have the government protect our civil liberties, not destroy our liberties. We need to turn that around. You know, the Fourth Amendment obviously was meant to protect our privacy, but this has been turned upside down as well. Our privacy is not protected. It's being constantly undermined. And even just recently, though, I think the people had a bit of a victory by addressing the subject of Stop Online Piracy Act. That has been a success in the people doing it. So that bill has been removed, as well as the SIPA bill in the Senate. And so the people spoke out, the members of Congress have responded, but the president has just signed recently a treaty that is trying to do the same thing. Let's hope and pray our senators don't ratify that treaty that will attack the internet and destroy our effort to get around the Main Street media with the internet. But the government was supposed to protect our liberties, but we have it turned upside down. We have and the government's supposed to be open, but we have the wrong way now. The government is secret and our privacy is gone. We need to turn that back. We need our privacy back, and we need a lot more open government. And of course, that gets us right back to the Federal Reserve System. During the crisis that came up in 07 and 08 and continues, the Congress, of course, spent over $1 trillion bailing out special interests, but the Fed was engaged in $15 trillion worth of churning credit, bailing out banks and big corporations and foreign government. And guess what? They don't want to tell us a thing. And this is astounding that this can go on. Matter of fact, Bernanke's already been to Europe. They have a crisis over there. All the banks are global. Our banks have investments in banks over there. Those banks got overextended by buying all this sovereign debt that's worthless, you know, debt from Greece and these different countries. So we, as a country, and through our Federal Reserve, through secrecy, is getting ready to bail out them as well. The limiting factor, of course, is the value of the dollar, and that is what is under threat. That is the big crisis that is coming. If we continue to do this, there will be a loss of confidence, interest rates will rise, and prices will go up. Our government tries to tell us there's no inflation, but I don't think I have to explain to you, prices are actually going up, and there's a lot of inflation out there. We could restore health to the economy. We would have to do several things. We would have to obviously change the tax code, reduce taxes, reduce spending. We should reduce regulations. Every time they create a problem with too much regulations, I think the solution is more regulation. So we got into this mess by too much spending, too much borrowing, too much regulation, too much printing money. So for 4 years now, that's all they've been doing. They're increasing the spending and the borrowing and the debt and the inflation. You can't get out of that problem that way. But the magnificent thing is that we don't have to invent the alternative to what we have. The answer is available to us. We live in a great country. We still have a lot of wealth. Unfortunately, most of the wealth is based on debt. But we have the traditions that even the Soviet system didn't have, and all we have to do is look to our traditions. We look to our Constitution, obey the law, and we'll get back on our feet in no time. I have come to a firm determination many years ago that even if I would be poorer and the whole country would be poorer, I'd rather live in a free country than one where the government's telling us how to live. But you know, we don't have to make that decision. The history shows now that the freer the country, the more prosperous is the country, and the smaller is the government. So we don't have to make a choice. And that to me is so wonderful. The wonderful thing about our traditions and what freedom is all about, and it's great to be in a town that emphasizes what freedom is. Freedom really brings people together. If you really truly understand what liberty means, that you're not judgmental. People can run their lives as they choose, as long as they don't hurt people, and as long as they don't steal from people or do harm. People might waste their lives, but that's their business. You know, let them waste their lives. But if we depend on the government to tell us what to do, all our lives are wasted. So everybody suffers. People do come together, and people are frightened. They say, well, if you just allow people to do anything they want, and they do, why would you let them do such and such? Well, the whole thing is if you legalize freedom of choice, you don't endorse the idea of what the people do. Because you legalize the choice in religion, that doesn't mean you endorse everybody's religious habits or their lack of religious habits. That's their choice. But too often we're too judgmental on our social values and say, well, if they don't do this, what we have to do is make them better people. But you know, the whole thing is if government takes upon themselves to try to make us better people and to mold the economy and mold the world, they only can do that at the expense of liberty. To me, the personal goal in life should be to seek out virtue and excellence, and that is best done. And that is best done, by freedom of choice. Matter of fact, otherwise it doesn't work. If the government takes on that role, and they want to take that role on all the time, they only do that by undermining personal liberty, which eventually undermines all our economic prosperity. So for me, politically, the goal is to follow the Constitution, seek peace, because through peace you have much more prosperity, to be willing and able and capable to defend our country if we're attacked. But overall, the odds of us being attacked, have you ever thought to think about the world today? We have more weapons than everybody else put together. If everybody attacked us, we could still take care of ourselves. The odds are essentially zilch, and anybody's going to attack us. And yet, we do take an oath of office to uphold the Constitution against all enemies. The foreign enemies, I don't think we have to worry about them. They're not going to invade us. But we do have to be concerned about our domestic enemies and the undermining of our liberties here at home. But the whole idea of what America was all about, and it is freedom, and that what it is. Freedom is still very popular in this country, and it's getting more popular, and more people are starting to realize the problems that we have is not because we don't have enough government. They've come to the conclusion because of the failure of government that we have way too much government. Freedom is something that's been developed over many centuries, if not thousands of years. But we've had the best experiment of any country. We've had the largest middle class, the most prosperity, and yet we're slipping away. In the last 100 years, I would say that we have lost our nerve in defending liberty. But in the last 4 or 5 years, I have noticed that there is a tremendous rising up of interest. And even those who have been on the receiving end are getting a little frightened because they know the treasury is bare. So we have this wonderful opportunity to reassert ourselves, to bring about these values that made America great. And that is the emphasis on individual freedom, our lives, and what the proper role of government ought to be. So this is as much of an opportunity as anything. I am so delighted when I go around the country, especially when I go to the universities, that the young people are listening. They know what they're getting. They're sick and tired of inheriting debt and war, let me tell you. And no matter how bad things are in society, there's always a remnant of people who hold things together, even though nobody knows where they are and what they do. But there's a group of people that have been around in this country for a long time. Even under the worst conditions of the Soviet system, they had a remnant, and I think Solzhenitsyn represented their remnant. Solzhenitsyn was born with the Russian Revolution and lived through that with this tremendous oppression. By the time, the Cold War was ending and we got to know about Solzhenitsyn, here was a person that was well educated, knew the classics, understood and spoke English, and all these things under that tyranny. So there's always those, and this country has them, and they're coming out because they have felt so lonely for so long. So those who have been disenfranchised or felt that way for so many years, I believe they're joining this freedom movement. And I'm excited about it. I am certainly glad I finally got to the place where freedom started. It's great to be here. Thank you very much.